Single mom? You work as a temp?
In the middle of my daughter Mary's wedding reception, that voice echoed across the room. The one who spoke was George, the man who would become Mary's father-in-law. I couldn't afford to cause a scene here. "I'm an office clerk," I answered quietly, and the groom's relatives chuckled, clearly looking down on me. Even so, I couldn't let this precious day for my daughter be ruined, so I held my ground.
Mom, let's go home.
Seeing me endure insult after insult, Mary spoke up for me. There was a determined look in her eyes. "You're right, but there's something I need to do first." I pulled out my phone from my bag and made a call. "I'd like to close my $50 billion account." At those words, the room instantly froze with tension. That moment changed everything for both Mary and me. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm turning 60 this year. I've been working as an office clerk at a company, and it's almost been 15 years now. This is the second half of my life. I spend each day hoping that I can live the rest of it slowly, peacefully, and true to myself. I divorced my husband 20 years ago. The reason for our divorce was his affair. He had been seeing a woman since the time I was pregnant with our daughter, Mary. When I found out about his affair, the only option that came to my mind was divorce. I felt so guilty for making Mary experience the pain of losing her dad so suddenly. Since then, it's been just the two of us, Mary and me, supporting each other. Now, Mary is getting married. When I heard the news, I was overjoyed. I've always wished for her to build a happy home and not end up making the same mistakes I did. Mary's wedding is in 2 weeks. The preparations have been keeping her extremely busy, and every time she has a day off, she comes over to my house and ropes me into helping with the wedding plans.
Sorry for making you do this every single week. Jake and I are just swamped.
It's totally fine. Just let me know if there's anything else I can do to help. Mary works at a major advertising agency. She recently got promoted to manager, so she's busier than ever. Her partner, Jake, works at a bank. He's the son of the president of Sunrise Bank, one of the largest banks around. When I heard that, I was so stunned I almost fell over. Jake works there too and holds the position of department head, dedicating himself to his job every day. As I watch Mary handle the wedding preparations with precision, I couldn't help but smile. It felt like just yesterday when I still thought of her as a child, but now she's a confident, mature woman. Mary has always been a hard worker, and more than anything, I want her to be happy. With those thoughts swirling in my mind, a mix of bittersweet pride and joy, the 2 weeks flew by, and soon it was the day of the wedding. I was more nervous than Mary, the bride herself. Today's finally here.
Don't get so nervous. You're making me nervous too.
Mary smiled awkwardly. I must have looked incredibly tense. The ceremony went smoothly, and then it was time for the reception. After arriving at the venue, I checked my seat and headed to my table. That's when I saw something unbelievable in front of me. There was supposed to be a name card with my name on it. However, the card in front of me read, "Single Mom Old Hag." I felt the blood drain from my face. Who would do something like this? It couldn't have been Mary or Jake. The wedding planner wouldn't do something so cruel either. Then, who did it? As I glanced around the room, my eyes met those of Jake's parents, the Andersons. They watched me glance around nervously and grinned. Could it have been them? Before I could process my thoughts, the Andersons walked over to me.
Well, is something wrong?
This name card, did you guys do that? I forced myself to speak, my voice trembling as I questioned the Andersons.
What about it? Isn't it the truth?
They smiled as they spoke, their words dripping with mockery. The Andersons were an elite family, especially since George was the president of Sunrise Bank. I'd also heard that his wife, Yvonne, had been very particular about their son's upbringing. Maybe they looked down on single-parent families. As I tried to make sense of the situation, that conclusion became clear to me.
Imagine choosing to marry into a family like her. Jake really is an odd one.
There were so many better options for him, don't you think?
The Andersons kept staring at me with smug, condescending grins. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by their relatives, who were whispering insults and laughing quietly as though I couldn't hear them. My vision went dark. I couldn't believe something like this was happening at my daughter's big day. I was overwhelmed with disbelief. I didn't care how much they looked down on me, but I couldn't stand seeing Mary being looked down on. Why would you do something like this?
Why? Because you don't belong here.
If you think you can build a good relationship with us, you're gravely mistaken. We don't accept you.
They kept throwing harsh words at me, one after another. In short, the Andersons couldn't stand the fact that Mary and I came from a single-parent family. If that's how they felt, they didn't need to go to such elaborate lengths. They probably just enjoyed tormenting people. I endured it all because I didn't want to ruin the wedding. I quickly hid the name card that said, "Single Mom Old Hag," so Mary wouldn't see it. Just then, the reception began.
Know your place.
With that parting shot, the Andersons returned to their seats. My heart was pounding, but I tried my best to focus and take in the sight of Mary in her wedding dress. The reception continued moving along, and after the performances, the guests began approaching the head table one after another to pour drinks and offer their congratulations. Among the crowd of well-wishers, the Andersons returned once more. With a sarcastic tone, they continued speaking to me.
Emily, is it true that you're a single mom? You don't have a husband?
That question was deliberate. I had already answered it clearly during the family meeting. They were asking just to make sure the people around us could hear. Yes, that's right. I wanted to avoid engaging with them, but I couldn't ignore the question altogether. George noticed my uncomfortable expression and said with a smirk,
Single mom? You work as a temp?
"I'm an office clerk. Is that a problem?"
An office clerk?
The Andersons suddenly started mocking me loudly, and I couldn't hide my confusion. The commotion was loud enough to reach the head table, and Mary looked over with a worried expression. The Anderson relatives around me kept glancing in my direction, whispering and looking down on me. The Anderson family was full of elites, and Harvard graduates were the norm. Their family included doctors, bankers, and politicians. They probably wanted to say that someone like me, a single mom working as an office clerk, had no place at this wedding. All I could do was endure it silently. I didn't want to ruin Mary's happiness, and my only goal was to protect her day. However, it seemed Mary had noticed what was happening. The eyes of the entire room began shifting from the head table to where we were. This was exactly what the Andersons wanted. They were trying to humiliate me in front of the wedding guests. I couldn't talk back. This was Mary's day. I told myself that as long as I could endure this, everything would be fine, and I held my ground. But my calm demeanor seemed to frustrate the Andersons more and more. Their words became harsher by the second.
Well, I can't believe there are still single moms nowadays. How pathetic, not even able to keep your family together.
Well, I suppose you didn't receive much of an education anyway.
With smug smiles, the Andersons continued to hurl cruel words at me. Their relatives nodded along, affirming the couple's cruel words. Sure, they might have received top-tier educations, but for all that, they were just a group of people looking down on others at such a joyous occasion. I couldn't help but wonder if their education even had any value. I sat there silently without responding. The reception would be over soon. All I had to do was endure until then. With a blank expression, I stood my ground, refusing to let my anger or sadness show. I couldn't let this wedding be ruined. Meanwhile, Yvonne and George kept spewing insults.
I can't believe a single-parent bride is joining our family. Maybe this marriage really was a mistake.
The word mistake was unbearable, and I instinctively shot a glare at George.
She probably didn't put much effort into her daughter's education, so this is the result.
Yvonne threw that comment at me with a smug smile, clearly enjoying herself. What did you just say? That was something I couldn't ignore. I could tolerate being insulted, but not Mary. She is truly hardworking, never letting being from a single-parent family become a disadvantage, and she relentlessly pursues her dreams. I respect her deeply for that. I couldn't tolerate anyone speaking badly about Mary. My raised voice echoed through the room, and the entire venue fell silent. Mary must have realized what was happening. You can look down on me all you want, but I won't let you speak ill of Mary. The air in the room grew tense. The planners had probably never experienced anything like this before. They looked flustered, unsure of what to do. I couldn't help but wonder if Mary really got along with this kind of in-laws. Just as that thought filled me with worry, I heard a voice behind me.
Mom,
I turned around at the sound of her voice, and there stood Mary. She must have noticed the Andersons throwing insults at me. She looked at me with a sad expression, but there was a glint of determination in her eyes. I knew exactly what Mary was thinking, but I also knew that her decision would mean calling off her marriage to Jake. And that was the one thing I couldn't bear to let happen. I just wanted Mary to be happy. If I could endure this, everything would be fine. Mary, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. This is your special day. Let's enjoy it, okay?
but
All eyes in the room were now on me and Mary. The guests murmured among themselves, and the Andersons continued to wear smug, condescending smiles. Of course, I wasn't without inner conflict. A storm of doubts swirled in my mind. If I could just hold out, maybe Mary could continue with the marriage and be happy. But would she truly be happy becoming part of a family that looked down on others like this? As I gazed into Mary's eyes, memories of my life flooded back to me. I had been looked down upon many times simply for being a single mother. Each time, I felt discouraged, but I kept moving forward because I had Mary. She never showed sadness over not having a dad and always stayed cheerful, with a bright smile on her face. Mary's presence had always been my source of strength. I turned to George once more and spoke firmly. Yes, Mary is the daughter of a single mother, but she worked twice as hard as anyone to build the life she has today. I'm incredibly proud of her. You can look down on me all you want, but I will not tolerate anyone looking down on Mary.
Oh, hard work. Let me tell you something. Your life is determined by the status you're born into. People from single-parent families like yours will always remain worthless, no matter what they do.
George's merciless words hit me hard, but I clenched my fists and held back my emotions. Yvonne and the other Anderson relatives giggled as if to agree with him. I've said what I needed to say now. I just have to endure whatever comes next. I took a deep breath to calm myself, and that's when Mary spoke.
Let's go home, Mom.
Mary, what are you saying? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was her big day and her once-in-a-lifetime moment. I never imagined that the bride herself would walk away from her own wedding. Then Mary spoke again.
There's something more important to me than my marriage, and that's my mom. So if I have to give up this marriage to protect her, then so be it.
Mary. As I stood there in shock, Mary stepped in front of George and declared,
We're calling off the wedding. I've been unsure for a long time, but now I've made up my mind. There's no way I could become part of your family.
I knew it, a single mother's daughter amounts to nothing. To throw away the chance to be related to the Anderson family. You must be truly stupid.
George sneered as he flung those words at Mary. Yvonne immediately chimed in.
Well, I'm relieved that this bloodline won't be tainted after all. There are far better women out there for Jake.
Her words made my blood boil. But Mary, the one being insulted, looked remarkably calm.
Oh, please, by all means. I'm sure a wife who will obey you without question would suit you much better.
What? Who do you think you are? We're the Andersons.
It felt like Yvonne's true feelings had finally slipped out. It was as if they were saying that marrying into a prestigious family was the key to a woman's happiness.
No matter how prestigious a family may be, I can't become part of a family that doesn't treat my mom with respect.
How dare you?
George muttered in frustration. Even though they didn't want the blood of a single-parent family mixing with theirs, they were irritated that Mary wouldn't fall in line with their expectations. They were truly selfish people. Mary continued.
Yes, I had planned to go through with this marriage. I thought it would be the best way to show my gratitude to my mom. But I finally realized something. Staying with people like you wouldn't do me any good.
What did you just say?
Mary glared at George and Yvonne.
You heard me. It's pathetic. You look down on people from single-parent families without even trying to understand their struggles.
Mary's words struck me right in the heart. I'm sure that Mary was never truly okay with being looked down on before either. She must have been holding it all in for my sake. I was overwhelmed with guilt.
And another reason I'm calling off this marriage isn't just because of you.
With those words, Mary turned toward Jake, the groom. Despite the chaos unfolding, he was still sitting at the head table, staring blankly into space.
I don't need a husband who just sits there and watches as my mom and I are treated like this.
What? Don't talk about Jake like that.
It was Yvonne who screamed hysterically. Mary let out a sigh of exasperation.
Jake doesn't love me. I knew that all along. You told him, didn't you? Hurry up and produce an heir. That's why he reluctantly agreed to marry me.
No, that's awful. I was so stunned by everything that had happened that those words escaped my lips. Mary had been trying her hardest to endure everything, no matter how cruel the situation. Criticism from the guests began to ripple through the room.
What's so wrong about telling him to produce an heir? For a prestigious family like ours, that's just common sense.
George said it shamelessly, without a hint of remorse. Mary must have realized she couldn't be part of a family with such a mindset.
That's exactly why you should find a woman who shares that mindset to marry Jake. If I married him, I wouldn't have any hope for my career anyway.
Mary's voice was calm, but her expression was icy. It was the look she had when she was truly furious.
Isn't that right, Jake?
Mary called out to him loudly. Jake, still in shock, finally stood up from the head table.
What did I do? This is too much.
It was hard to believe those were the words of someone who was supposed to be a responsible adult about to get married.
You didn't do anything. That's the problem. You never did anything for me. You didn't even love me, did you?
Jake was at a loss for words in response to Mary.
Anyway, we're leaving.
Encouraged by Mary's unwavering resolve, I stood up as well. In that moment, I had already decided on my next move. I slowly looked around at every member of the Anderson family and muttered, "What a shame. I was planning to build a strong relationship with you both personally and professionally."
Personally and professionally. What are you talking about?
George muttered with a confused expression. They would soon come to regret not understanding the meaning behind those words. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and made a call. "Hello, Sunrise Bank? Yes, I'd like to close my $50 billion account." I could see the color drain from George's face as he heard my words.
Wait, $50 billion?
The room grew silent as the surrounding guests stopped talking and turned their attention to us. After finishing my call, I locked eyes with George. What a pity things turned out this way. Both my daughter and I had planned to foster a positive relationship with your family. George's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, as though he couldn't comprehend what I had just said.
What do you mean? You're just a single mom working as an office clerk. There's no way you could have $50 billion.
And what if I told you I do?
This time, Mary spoke in my place. Yes, I may be just an office clerk now, but I used to run my own company. I had founded a marketing firm, married my ex-husband, and welcomed Mary into my life. My days were fulfilling both personally and professionally. But life doesn't always stay sweet forever. A few years later, the company went bankrupt due to financial struggles. Around that time, I discovered that my ex-husband, who had stopped coming home often, was having an affair. With my career gone and my marriage falling apart, we ended up divorcing. My life spiraled downward all at once. But I didn't give up. Instead, I immediately decided to use my remaining assets to start investing. As a result, my wealth steadily grew, and now I also have a role as an investor. The one managing my assets is Sunrise Bank. When I first learned that Mary's future father-in-law was the president of the bank, I was surprised, but I took it as a twist of fate. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine he would look down on me like this at his son's wedding. Seeing that George still couldn't grasp the situation, I spoke again with finality. I have a $50 billion account with your Sunrise Bank, but as of today, I'll be closing it. The room erupted into murmurs of shock and disbelief. George's mouth hung open as if he'd seen something impossible.
What are we supposed to do now?
No, this can't be. I don't believe it.
George muttered to himself, repeating the words like a broken record. At the head table, Jake had gone completely pale. Yes, we're a single-parent family, but with enough effort, you can rise above any circumstances. However, your words have been deeply disappointing. We can't continue any kind of relationship with you, neither Mary nor I. The reason I had the strength to take this stand was because of Mary. She taught me the courage to speak up against those who hurt us. Mary truly is the daughter I'm so proud of. And I have no intention of ever doing business with you again.
Wait, please.
George finally seemed to grasp the meaning of my words and frantically tried to stop me.
We sincerely apologize for the offense. Please, let's find a way to continue our business relationship.
The president of a major bank begged for his forgiveness. Jake couldn't hide his shocked expression at the sight of George's desperation. He had probably never seen his father beg anyone before. George's sudden shift in attitude was so blatant that even Mary was too stunned to speak. "What are you talking about? It's too late. What's been said can't be taken back. Your words hurt both Mary and me."
We deeply regret what happened. Please, allow us to make a formal apology.
"George." I couldn't bear it any longer and spoke quietly. Even in this moment, I could see how deeply ingrained their condescension was. I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. More than anything, I couldn't forgive the fact that Mary had been hurt by this family. Once you lose someone's trust, it's nearly impossible to regain it. You all claim to be Ivy League graduates, yet you don't seem to understand something that's simple. How disappointing. And shouldn't you be apologizing to Mary, not to me?
Silence.
George lowered his head, his face full of frustration, unable to say a word.
$50 billion. What am I supposed to do?
I watched George with a calm, cold gaze. I felt no guilt, and he had brought this upon himself. Even without this wedding, this day of reckoning would have come sooner or later. I hoped this would make him reflect, though I knew better than anyone that people like him don't change easily. "Let's go, Mary." When I called out to her, Mary smiled and followed me. The planner, who had witnessed everything, guided Mary to the waiting room to help her change out of her dress. Jake just sat there, watching the entire scene unfold. It was unsettling to think that someone so passive was serving as a department head at Sunrise Bank. He had likely coasted through life on the strength of his father's connections. The thought almost made me pity him. The Anderson family would probably remain unchanged, unaware as people slowly distanced themselves from them. I couldn't imagine living a life like that. I sincerely apologized to our family members who came to support us and explained the situation, thanking them as they prepared to leave. Of course, I made sure to return their wedding gifts. Most of the guests had witnessed everything, so they left understanding the situation. After seeing off the last guest, Mary and I left the venue as well. Shortly after, I withdrew the $50 billion from my account and cut all ties with Sunrise Bank and the Anderson family. Starting the very next day, George and Jake came to my house daily to apologize, but of course, I had no intention of meeting them. Despite being ignored repeatedly, they continued showing up every day, pressing the doorbell over and over again. It was obvious that their apologies weren't out of genuine remorse for their actions, but rather an attempt to save the bank's reputation. Knowing that made me even more determined not to see them. When they grew desperate from being unable to get a response, they resorted to sitting in front of my house, waiting for me to come outside. It was clear they had no respect for others whatsoever. Completely fed up, I called the police and had them removed. Word of Sunrise Bank's disgrace at Mary's wedding spread quickly, and they began losing the trust of their major clients and business partners one by one. News of George's incompetence as bank president spread throughout the industry, causing Sunrise Bank's reputation to plummet. Due to the decline in the bank's credibility, its stock price plummeted in the market. Investors seemed to agree with the assessment of the bank's management and began selling off their shares. Investors are highly sensitive to even the slightest changes. They quickly sensed that something had happened at Sunrise Bank and began reassessing its value. As a result, the bank's capital strength declined significantly, making its financial situation increasingly dire. The sudden withdrawal of major clients led to an audit being conducted at Sunrise Bank. The investigation into the bank situation revealed that Sunrise Bank was incapable of independently restructuring itself. Additionally, its opaque management practices came to light, further cornering the Anderson family. The Anderson family's beliefs and self-centered decision-making, which had triggered the conflict with me, became the subject of widespread gossip in the financial industry. Voices calling for the resignation of the leadership grew louder, and the Andersons completely lost control of the bank's management. With the bank's management deteriorating, George and Jake were forced to step down, taking responsibility for this situation. It was effectively a dismissal in disgrace. Having treated others arrogantly for so long, no one extended a helping hand to them when things fell apart. Less than 2 months after the scandalous wedding, both Jake and George found themselves unemployed. Of course, this incident became a major topic within the industry, and the Anderson family was branded as a disgraced dynasty of failed executives. Even after the Andersons were ousted from the bank's management, Sunrise Bank's financial situation showed no signs of improvement and remained dire. The remaining options were either to be absorbed by another major bank or to restructure on a smaller scale. In the end, Sunrise Bank was absorbed by a larger financial institution. The brand and name that the Anderson family had once boasted about so proudly vanished, marking the end of its once storied history. They completely disappeared from the financial industry. After that, the Anderson family continued to decline until they became a shadow of their former selves. Since much of their wealth had been tied to the bank's management, the collapse of Sunrise Bank caused their assets to dwindle significantly. Even when they tried to start new ventures, they couldn't escape the widespread bad reputation they had earned in the financial world. And with their history of arrogance, it was unthinkable that anyone would hire them. They began living modestly, slowly spending what little remained of their assets without any luxuries. After leaving the wedding early, Mary and I visited each of our relatives to personally apologize. Everyone offered us kind words, and their support became a source of strength for us.
Mom, maybe my decision wasn't wrong after all.
Seeing Mary's eyes sparkle as she said that filled me with joy as well. The Andersons could never tear apart the bond between Mary and me. We had overcome so many hardships together. People like them, who couldn't even begin to imagine such struggles, could never truly be our family. It was clear we could never be family with people like that. Mary had planned to register her marriage to Jake after the wedding, but instead, she ended up breaking things off and staying single. Until the very end, Jake seemed clueless about the gravity of the situation, leaving Mary so exasperated that she couldn't help but vent about it. We both felt it was a relief to finally cut ties with Jake for good. Afterward, we decided to take our vacation to put the events of the wedding behind us. It had been a long time since Mary and I had traveled together. We hadn't had the chance to relax and enjoy each other's company like this in ages, and I was grateful for the time we finally had to just unwind.
Thank you, Mom.
I lost count of how many times Mary whispered those words during our trip. But if anyone should be thankful, it's me. The wedding incident may have been painful, but we overcame it together. I felt our bond as mother and daughter grow even stronger. Marry someone you truly love. Your happiness is the greatest gift you can give me. You don't need to force yourself to be dutiful for my sake. I shared with Mary what I had learned from this whole experience. Mary had always been a kind and thoughtful child. She had almost thrown her life away just to be a good daughter to me. I'm truly glad she didn't end up marrying into the Anderson family.
Thanks, Mom. But I still plan to make you proud in my own way.
Her words made me smile. I felt so grateful to be her mother. We enjoyed our week-long vacation to the fullest, but we also came up with a plan during our time away. We decided to start a business together. Mary and I had always talked about starting a company that sells souvenirs from all over the country. But back then, we were both too busy to take the idea seriously. Especially with Mary preparing for her wedding to Jake, she had no time for anything else. After cutting ties with the Andersons, Mary said, "I want a fresh start and to do something new. That's when I suggested the idea of us co-running a business. When I brought it up, Mary was immediately on board, and things progressed quickly.
If we're going to do this, now's the time.
You're right. It feels like the perfect time. With my experience running a company in the past, and Mary's background working at a major advertising agency, I believe that by combining our strengths, we could overcome any challenge in business as well. Mary seemed to have gained confidence from overcoming this experience. And so, we went on to establish our company. A few years later, the business we started together is thriving, and our team has grown steadily. Everyone in the company feels like family. Mary also found a new partner, a wonderful person who treats her with love and respect. They're planning to get married next year. He's nothing like Jake. In fact, I'm certain he'll make Mary truly happy. Mary's radiant smile as she talks about her future makes me feel overjoyed as well. Our family is growing, and as we cherish and support each other, I know we'll continue to live a happy and fulfilling life.